So the next person we have who's going to be here is Jaya Priya Reinhalter. Jaya Priya Reinhalter was born and raised in Kashi, an international and interfaith community in South Florida. Her academic work focused on international communities, and in 2013, she returned to Kashi to explore its continuing legacy. In 2014, Jaya was elected to Kashi's board of directors. She also acts as Kashi's director of global outreach, leads Kashi's youth network called Kashi Next Generation, and is project manager for Kashi's Grow Ashi campaign. Did I say that right?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me, everyone. I'm going to read to you just an excerpt from a larger piece that I wrote for this tribunal, and try and stay within my time. One of the biggest lies we've ever been told is that there's such thing as war abroad. There is no such thing. The costs always come home in the most insidious of ways. Although I cannot speak with much insight about the Iraqi experience, what I can offer is my experience growing up in the age of terror and so-called inevitable warfare, and as a family member of young men deployed in our Iraq war. Perhaps the biggest insult was the propaganda that told us this was an unavoidable and just war in the name of both our and the Iraqi people's well-being and happiness. We were told that the losses incurred were worth it, and that what the Iraqi government had done and intended to do was much worse. If we wanted to engage in a morality contest or compare atrocities, we might find the pro-war US narrative beginning to unravel. According to a report released in 2015 by Physicians for Social Responsibility and others, at least 1 million Iraqis were killed between 2003 and 2012 alone, and as a direct result of the US invasion and occupation. That same study found that at least 1.3 million people have been killed in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan as the result of the so-called war on terror waged in the aftermath of 9/11. These figures do not even include refugees killed by rough conditions and dangerous travel after they were forced to flee their homes. So in the exacting words of Arundhati Roy, one set of our atrocities is called terrorism and the other progress. Even more, the invasion of Iraq signified the initiation of a new state of being in the United States, an ambiguous state of protracted warfare. The war on terror, by nature of its very name, told us that we would be engaged in an unending state of conflict, at any location in the world, at any time. At this point, I have lived out my entire teenage and adult life under the auspices of this war on terror. Today, much of my work relates to building community and cooperation across lines of faith and religious difference. In the US, I resent that this work must focus so heavily on deep-seated Islamophobic sentiments in our nation, where Islamophobia has become a government-sponsored national illness. Fear, disconnection, and unending state of conflicts wreak havoc on our ability to feel natural states of compassion and interconnection. We've been asked to forget that the people of Iraq, and all Muslims for that matter, are our brothers and our sisters. Sometimes I wonder if there's a worse oppression than being taught not to feel. What does this do to our conscience? As a result of this and a whole universe of other insults, I've also become a student of conflict. As a student of conflict, I often hear violence referred to as an extreme version of turning up your volume, due to either an actual or a perceived distance between us. Whether it be physical distance, emotional distance, or power differentials, the larger this canyon grows between us, the louder we have to be in order to hear one another. Whether this turning up of the volume looks like economic sanctions, violent retaliations, political slander, or even this tribunal, our efforts to be heard are expressed in so many ways. For students of conflict, you also learn that very quickly that there are two essential factors in creating spaces where conflict stands the chance of transformation: power and love. In many liberal spaces, and particularly anti-war spaces, you often hear a variety of adages that essentially mean all you need is love. While in some ethereal plane I may agree with this, I've come to learn that love without power can be feeble and sentimental. Even more, love that does not acknowledge the need to transform power may actually reinforce the gluttony of the already powerful, and permit ongoing exploitation and abuse. Where love creates the potential for transformation and naturally draws us towards unity, power is required to realize these aspirations. That said, in the absence of love, power becomes a tool of brutality and separation that drives our own self-interest. In the case of the George W. Bush administration and the invasion on Iraq, we see this exact impulse at play. There we found an already powerful voice demanding that it be the only voice. This kind of power erodes. It's untethered and rapacious in its search for itself, and its power without love. The idea is that this would be democracy's role, to keep power in check with our collective consciousness, which tends to lean towards love. Genuine collective consciousness, when free of manipulation and our basic needs are met, always lean towards love. Our own Declaration of Independence reminds us that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. On the other hand, are we really shocked? Is the Iraq War an aberration? Do we really have permission to speak on the Iraq War without talking about the war machine, capitalism, nationalism, and imperialism? So really, my question is a perennial one. How do we give power back to our collective conscience and move away from the imperial impulse of self-promoting power? In essence, this is not just a call to end the Iraq War, but a call for a whole new social reality. The entire rationale behind the inevitability of war is a cruel and terrible insult to the human imagination. Today we're coming together to give power to another imagination, to another set of possibilities, life-giving possibilities. When we are talking about terribly violent things like war, we must call on a distinctly empowered love, and we must be willing to talk about what it means to take back power. As Adam Kahane reminds us, dialogue that does not acknowledge and work with power cannot create new social realities. So I beg us at this tribunal to consider deeply what power looks like in the anti-war movement, or specifically in relationship to the Iraq War. In my own estimation, the Commission on Truth and Accountability is a great example of one approach to dealing with the transformation of power. Nothing calls power into being like the truth, and accountability can be the backbone of truth. But we must also grow. To grow, we must find ways to cultivate the growth of life and not just its maintenance. To do this, we need deep community. In fact, true security comes from strong and vibrant communities based on interconnection and mutual support. Finding ways to build systems of mutual support opens possibilities for transformation and growth that do not actually destroy that which we are trying to nurture. At last, if we're equipped with a map of power and love for the Iraq War, a growing narrative of truth, deepened collaboration and community, and the possibility of moving towards connection, we may actually find that war is not so inevitable after all. Thank you.